and welcome to a podcast episode for our anti-drug campaign, Let's Talk Drugs. In this episode, we're going to be interviewing Caitlin, who is a recovering drug addict, and JC is going to be co-hosting this with me. So
Hello.
Let's go straight into the interview. So Caitlin, when did you start taking drugs, and what kind of drugs were you taking?
My drug use started at around 16. Looking back now, I realise my behaviour was raising so many red flags in regards to addiction, but at the time I didn't realise. My journey started around about when I was 16. I was taken into hospital with really severe stomach pains. The doctor gave me some medication. I can remember it now, like so vividly. It was a medication called tramadol. And I'll never forget that feeling that I got from that medication. It was almost like a feeling of warmth and security, and it also got rid of my physical pain. So over the next few years, I had 3 operations due to this stomach pain and still no diagnosis, and that really started affecting my mental health then. I felt like no one believed me. I was called an attention seeker, and not just by my friends, but also by doctors and nurses. And I was just so angry and hurt. You know, my pain was real, and I felt like nobody was listening to me. So I began to take these strong painkillers like they were sweets, because that's exactly what they did. They killed the pain, both physically and psychologically. At this point in my addiction, I was taking mainly pharmaceuticals, so tramadol, codeine, morphine, but never once did I anticipate what this behaviour would create. At the age of 20, I started taking class A's, so heroin, crack cocaine, because by this point my doctors, they'd sort of copped on to how many tablets I was taking, and they stopped my prescriptions. So yeah.
Do you think you got enough drug education in school?
The answer to this is no. I can never remember having any kind of assembly about drugs and the dangers of drugs. Maybe I was off that day, but I can't recall any education of it. Obviously, I remember the basics advice that you get. You know, drugs are bad, but that's not enough, and that won't be enough for anybody. I'm in no way blaming this for my addiction, but I do think it's something that will help the youth of our society.
Yeah, so following on from that point, like from what you just said and what Jason just asked, do you think if you would have got more drug education at school, it kind of would have prevented you from going down that path?
I can't say for sure, but I do think it would have certainly deterred me. I wouldn't want to say that yes, I wouldn't have used drugs because of that, because I wouldn't blame my addiction on, not having sufficient education about drugs, but I would say it would have definitely deterred me. When I started using drugs, I really didn't know the dangers of them that much, and I didn't really know where to go really, in terms of, getting help as a young person with a drug addiction. It's not really advertised well. There's like, if you'd have asked me back then of a platform or a place I could have gone to for help, I wouldn't have been able to name one place.
Did drugs affect your relationship with people and the way you interact with people?
Yeah, immensely. There was a point where I'd lost everything, but more importantly, everyone around me. People just couldn't cope with my behaviour, and I don't blame them one bit for that. I was a very selfish, careless individual whose only priority was drugs, and there came a time where, my family, they couldn't have anything to do with me anymore. I was making them ill through the stress. Anybody who knows me knows that my number one love in this world is my family, but that completely went out the window with drugs and just made me not care about those around me. So the way I acted just completely ruined basically all relationships with people I had around me. But luckily now I've been able to build them relationships back up with the help I've got.
That's really good to hear that you've built the relationships back up. My next question is, what advice would you give to a young person suffering with a drug addiction or who knows somebody who might be suffering?
My advice is to get help. If you can't speak to anybody in your family, go to somebody who you trust. It doesn't have to be a family member. It could be somebody at school. It could be somebody at college. It could be a friend that's maybe a bit older than you, but seek help. Don't suffer alone, because it's a horrible thing when you're alone, and a problem shared is a problem halved. That is a true saying. Once you have got this off your chest to somebody else, you will feel better. And once you seek help, there are so many organisations out there that excel in giving treatments to addicts, and to people who know addicts that are suffering, to just get help.
Thank you, Caitlin. So at what point did you realise your addiction had to stop?
I think it was the point where I looked up one day around me and had nothing, or didn't have anybody to, sort of go to for help. My family had had enough of me. My friends had had enough of me. I didn't even have a phone because I'd sold it for drugs. I literally just had nothing. And that was the point in my life when I thought, this has got to stop now. I was just a shell of a person. I was just so broken, and it was a feeling that I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. It was just such an empty, it's such an empty, depressed feeling. It just had to stop.
Yeah, so following on from what you just said and what JC asked, what was your first step towards stopping the addiction?
My first step was telling my mum. I sat down with my mum and I told her, Mum, I'm a class A drug addict. And to this day, she still says that she's never been so shocked in all her life, but she was still there for me. She was like, okay, right, we're going to get you help. And I remember the next day we went to my GP, and most GPs offer this service that I'm about to tell you about as well. They do an outreach service, so your local drug addiction service will work through your GP. So they will, for me, then they assigned me what they call a key worker, a drug key worker, who then a couple of weeks after sat me down, got all my details written down, what I'd been through, what drugs I was taking, what doses of drugs I was taking, and got me on a prescription for a heroin substitute, which was methadone. And then after that was done, we then began having counselling sessions and working on plans for what I want out of the future and what I want out of recovery. So yeah.
Thank you. In your opinion, what is the main reason that someone would turn to drugs, and what do you think can be done to stop them?
The main reason I think somebody could turn to drugs is the way they're feeling. I mean, anybody who takes drugs, now this is recreationally or in addiction, they're taking drugs to change the way they're feeling. So it would seek the question, really, if you're not really happy with how you're feeling, are you, if you're going to take drugs? So I think, to me, my opinion would be that, the number one reason why somebody would take drugs is because they're not happy with the way they're feeling. There's many other factors that can come into it: peer pressure, curiosity, but yeah, that's my sort of opinion of the main reason why somebody would take drugs.
So why were drugs so appealing to you in the first place?
I think drugs were appealing to me after I came out of hospital and realised how drugs could help. Well, I say help me, they weren't helping me, but they changed how I felt psychologically and physically. They took my stomach pain away. I thought, hang on a second, other drugs might do this. So I then searched off for other drugs that could make me feel the same way. And there's a saying actually that someone said to me, and it's so true. When you pick up drugs, you think you've found heaven, when in actual fact you found hell. Like, looking back now, there was a time when I thought, oh, I found something good here. You know, I found the way it can change the way I feel, but it couldn't be further from the truth that something I thought I'd found that was good really was in complete the fact opposite. It was awful.
How long have you been drug free?
I've been drug free for 4 months now, but I did have a lapse in between. So I follow a program called Smart Recovery UK, and they are brilliant. That's the program that got me into abstinence this time around, and other programs that I've been involved with, they sort of put shame on you for having a relapse, whereas Smart Recovery, they call it a lapse, because that's what it is. A relapse is something that you continue to do. So yeah, it's been 4 months with one lapse in between that I don't shame myself for anymore, because I have learnt with every relapse, I have learnt something new. That's not to say that I'm going to go out there and carry on relapsing now, but you know, I have definitely learnt something new in every relapse that I have had. So yeah, it's onwards and upwards, and I hope there's many more months to come.
Well, I think you're doing amazing.
Oh, thank you. It's hard some days, but you know, it's definitely worth it to not wake up and literally feel like you want to die anymore. So
yeah, it's amazing that you've been recovering for so long. We are coming to the end of this podcast episode. So what is the last message you would like to give to young people out there?
Just seek education on drugs, because it's something that I wish greatly I'd have had back then. Just seek education on drugs. Talk about drugs with people. Don't let it be a taboo subject. Talk about it with your family if you can, with your friends if you can. You know, just strike up that conversation and let's get talking about drugs.
So thank you so much, everybody, for coming and listening into this podcast. Make sure you follow our social medias on Instagram and Twitter at Drugs No More, and you can check out our website for a cheat sheet on how to have a conversation with drugs and conversation starters, things like that, and also a sheet that lists a lot of helpful organisations for you if you do need support with a drug addiction or for well-being support as well, and I will make sure that that is linked in the description down below. So thank you so much for listening, and make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you can hear any more podcasts.